Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine. I'm the exec for the Professional Development Committee at SWIM, and today I want to share some study tips and tricks for pre-med classes at Stanford. So for a short outline, I'll first go through some principles of studying and then how to apply these study tips to classes such as chemistry, biology, math, and physics. Then I will go through some study tools that I have used that I have found personally very helpful for studying, common study mistakes, and what a sample weekly exam schedule might look like. So, as we all know, Stanford moves very fast. We are on the quarter system, so most classes have 1 to 2 and sometimes even 3 midterms, along with finals in just 10 weeks. Because of the fast pace of these classes, which often cover a lot of content in a very short amount of time, having a strategic and organized study system is really important. Something that I've also found very helpful throughout my time at Stanford is that active recall is so important and much more useful than passive recall. Active recall is, for example, testing yourself, saying, do I know this? Kind of like writing stuff down without referencing anything, while passive recall just means like looking through your notes. And I found that active recall really helps solidify concepts in certain classes. So first I want to go into what studying for chemistry might look like. So I'm currently in Chem 143, and throughout the chem sequence, I found that probably one of the most important things is to do and redo the practice questions. This means redoing any practice problems they give you, any worksheets or tutorials, and then definitely the practice midterms as well. When you get into OChem and biochem, you're also going to be learning a lot of mechanisms. So it's really important that you learn how to write these mechanisms from memory. Often when I'm studying for my midterms or finals, I will make a study sheet like the one on the right, where I'll have each mechanism, all of the arrow pushing, and then notes on the very right side, just so I can remind myself of what mechanisms do what. I found that using a whiteboard is really helpful to practice reactions and equilibrium steps and making a study sheet like this only after testing yourselves. So trying to first write the mechanisms from memory before looking back at your notes. Additionally, I found that focusing on patterns is really important. In OChem and biochem, a lot of these reactions will have very similar arrow pushing mechanisms. So it's really helpful if you kind of learn these patterns that occur throughout different reactions and what the proper steps are in terms of arrow pushing. For biology, by far, my favorite tip is to use Anki for terms and processes. So Anki is a really helpful app that you can have on your phone or your computer that uses active recall to help you learn flashcards. So this is an example of what my flashcards for Hum Bio look like. And what I really like about Anki is that it's really meant for you. There's an algorithm to make sure that you study a certain number of cards and remember a certain number of cards each day. And I found that it's super helpful for classes that are packed with information like biology. Additionally, I think making concept maps to connect ideas is also really important, especially when you're learning physiology and anatomy, like kind of drawing things out to really solidify things in your memory. Additionally, redrawing pathways from memory. In HumBio 3A, for example, we learn a lot about the different pathways of the body and different like cellular mechanisms and processes. So knowing how to write these from memory is also super important in exams. And lastly, I think explaining these processes out loud, step by step, to a friend is also really helpful. So you can kind of fact check each other and make sure you really understand the material. This is one example of an Anki card that I would make for myself. So if in class they taught us what the basal nucleus of Maynard was, I would write in my Anki cards, what is the basal nucleus of Maynard's role in the body? And then on the other side, I would say autonomic nervous system, learning, and memory. So this way you can really test yourself before the answer is revealed to you. For math, I think similar to chemistry, it's really important to do a lot of practice problems and especially redoing your missed problems without looking at your solutions. So if you miss a problem, instead of just saying, oh, like now I know how to do it, in a couple days, once you've forgotten it, maybe trying to do the problem again, or like when you're studying for a test, redoing your P sets or your practice exams can be super helpful to identify more weak spots. Additionally, looking for patterns and problem types. In a lot of Stanford math classes, the kind of problems they give you are going to be pretty similar to what is on the P sets and what is on the practice exams. So really trying to understand how to approach a problem, kind of like sitting down and looking at the problem stem first before just trying to go into it can be really helpful. This kind of ties into my next point, which is writing down clues for when to use a specific method. And then lastly, obviously, it's really good to practice under timed conditions before exams. I know a lot of math exams and also chemistry exams have pretty short periods of time where you can take the exam. So it's really important to learn how to sort of prioritize problems that you know how to do and maybe leaving some super hard questions for last. For physics, I think it's really important to be able to draw the diagrams before solving, kind of checking whether your answer makes physical sense. Like, for example, drawing a force diagram or just trying to like draw things out before making an answer. Additionally, a lot of physics revolves around identifying knowns, unknowns, and equations. So really making sure you have those equations in your mind if you are not allowed a cheat sheet and doing many practice problems. There's a very common theme, and it's obviously doing a lot of practice problems and doing them more than once to really identify what spots you struggle in. Yeah, so moving on to some study tools. As I emphasize, I think Anki is really, really important for spaced repetition. Additionally, when you are studying for the MCAT, one of the most common resources are thousands of Anki flashcards. And almost every med school applicant and student I know use Anki for the biology portion of the MCAT exam. So it's a really good tool and skill to have, especially when you're studying for the MCAT as well. I also mentioned whiteboards, so you can try to write these different reactions and processes down for active recall. Error logs for tracking mistakes, which I will go into in a bit, and trying out different methods for focus. For example, the Pomodoro method, which I will also explain in a couple slides, and definitely doing and redoing practice exams for exam prep. Yeah, this is an example of something that I would write down on the whiteboard when I'm studying for biology, sort of writing down like glucose, all the different processes associated with glucose, what they do, and what this molecule of glucose eventually does in the body. The Pomodoro technique is a really popular technique among a lot of university students. Basically, you focus for 25 minutes, do work for 25 minutes, and take a 5-minute break. And if you do the cycle 4 times, then you can sort of award yourself a longer break. And experts have really found that this technique can be super helpful in helping you not burn out and also remember concepts faster. So this is kind of an example of an error log. Basically, you would write down your problem, the specific mistake, and then really important is why you missed it. For example, did you miss it because you simply didn't know the information, or did you sort of misread the question? Did you understand this mechanism wrong? Did you mistake the graph for something else? And it's really helpful to write this down so you know not to do it in the future. And then the correct answer. So error logs are actually a really popular technique when studying for the MCAT as well. I've known students who write down every single question they got wrong in a big spreadsheet, and it really helps for identifying your weak points and seeing what you need to study more. By tracking mistakes, you can remember what you got wrong and also review it to solidify those concepts. I also wanted to share some really helpful study tools on campus. So we probably all heard of CTL tutoring. It's free tutoring. You can do drop-ins or make an appointment with one of the CTL tutors. The Hume Center is really good for oral presentations as well as writing. If you've taken Power, you've probably been to the Hume Center. It's super helpful, but it's kind of like peer review by different students, and they can also help you work on your public speaking skills. The Physics Tutoring Center is also somewhere where you can get physics help. Lair is for computer science. So Lair has office hours for a lot of the computer science subjects. Sumo is for math. You can go there for tutoring as well. And then if you're really struggling with a particular topic, you can also schedule an independent academic coaching session where they'll kind of help you review what you got wrong and help you develop better study methods. And of course, I can't emphasize this enough. Office hours is super helpful for probably every single class, especially for chemistry and math, where the P-sets are really hard to do if you don't ask a TA. And these TA review sessions, or just review sessions in general for exams, are also super helpful. So I would definitely recommend attending those if possible. I've also found study groups to be really important, especially in chemistry, because you can really explain concepts to each other, kind of test each other, and also compare problem-solving methods. And during these study groups, don't just like split your work up or like socialize. If you really want to make the best of it, you should try to teach others because it kind of shows what you actually know. And your peer who is studying the same subject can also work on telling you what you need to know as well. I also wanted to mention AI. So there's definitely a lot of controversies while using AI, but it can be a very good study tool if you know how to use it effectively. So some methods that I found work really well for me is asking AI to make practice questions, maybe giving it like your practice problems and saying and prompting it to make similar practice problems I found can be really helpful. Quizzing you one question at a time or just explaining concepts at different levels. Additionally, I've had friends who've asked AI to help make Anki cards, which can be really helpful and save you a lot of typing. And it's important not to just copy answers from AI because you really want to do this learning yourself, especially if you're going to be taking the MCAT and these concepts will come up again and again. So one example prompt would be quiz me on this lecture one question at a time and wait for my answer. And in this way, if for some reason you don't have a study group or you don't have someone that you are able to study with, you can use AI to help reinforce your knowledge. Some common study mistakes that I have experienced throughout my time here is only rereading my notes. So I used to only do passive recall, and this past year, I found that active recall is definitely much quicker, saves so much time for remembering concepts. So don't just reread your notes, try to redo practice questions or actively test yourself on them. Also, making pretty study guides but not practicing. Like for the chem mechanisms review sheet, you don't want to just make it once and then forget about it. You should constantly be reviewing it every single day. Also, waiting till the week of the exam. Maybe this is more manageable for midterms, but in your sophomore year, all of your exams can pile up at once. So it's really important to make a study plan maybe 2 or even 3 weeks before the exam. Avoiding office hours is also common, but really office hours can be a really great space to peer review, help each other review, and also ask the TA if you have any questions. Also, of course, studying with distractions. If you find that studying with other people makes you tend to socialize or not do your work, then you might want to also reconsider some other study methods that you have. Also, I understand it. Understanding a concept does not equal you being able to apply that knowledge on your test. And I think that really speaks volumes in biology and chemistry because you can understand a concept, but they can make you apply that concept in a different manner on the test. So you have to be constantly testing yourself on these concepts and trying to apply it to different scenarios to make sure you truly grasp this concept. This is a sample weekly exam schedule that you would do. I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but this is a really helpful resource for sure. You know, trying to take a first practice test, take a diagnostic test to see where you're at, reviewing the hardest topics, redoing missed questions, making a study sheet, and of course, the day before the exam, doing an overall review of all the formulas, pathways, or mechanisms. And of course, on the exam day, you want to get a good night rest, eat and hydrate, and check that you have all your supplies. I hope these study tips have become helpful for you. They certainly have helped me a lot throughout my time here at Stanford. And I also want to reiterate that our swim resource drive has a lot of study sheets, study guides, cheat sheets that you can use for different classes. And I personally have found those really helpful. I've also uploaded my Anki cards from biology from HumBio into the resource drive. And I think those are really great for active recall as well. Thank you so much, and I wish you the best final season.